Hey, it's Kisha here with Defending the Early Years podcast. We'll be focusing on amplifying the voices of early childhood educators, advocates, and all of those who love children. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Defending the Early Years podcast with Kisha Reid. And today I'm here talking with Deb Curtis. You guys may know Deb from her many early childhood books. One in which I have next to my desk at all times. It's called The Visionary Director. One of my favorites, by the way. Welcome. Tell us about yourself, your work, and why you're here today on the podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm here because I really want to be best friends with Kisha. Because she's a kid watcher like me.
Yes, we are.
And I feel like I see every day sort of your passion, and that's my passion, right? I sometimes, people's eyes glaze over. I don't know if that happens to you when I'm describing things that I see children do, because nobody's as into it usually and thinking about it so closely. So I was really excited to be here with you. And basically that's who I am. I'm a kid watcher. I've been watching children since 1969, when I was in the very first Head Start program in my community, when Head Start was just the summer before kindergarten, right? And I just knew that's where I wanted to be from then on, because children they're remarkable. And I have to say, if you do the years, that's 1969, I was 17. So I just turned 70, which is so weird, but kind of fun because I like being a little old lady. And that's over 50 years of watching children.
And you still work with children, right? Currently.
Yeah, I do. I spend several days a week in a program. Right now I'm working with my really dear colleagues, Cassie Worley and Hesley. And they're people I knew from other places, and they moved to Seattle. So
wow.
Now they work together, which is really good. And I'm working with preschool kids right now, which I haven't done for like probably the last 15 years. I've been with children under 3 because they're my favorite humans on the planet. And I went back to the preschool to be with Hesley and Cassie, and they, I'm like surprised again about how amazing they are. Oh my gosh, it's just astonishing. I wish people could see that. I think for me, it gives me hope for humans, like these amazing people who know how to be in the world in so many ways that we could learn from. So anyway, that's where I am. I'm going to be here probably through the end of summer, and then I really have to find a under 3 group.
Yeah, you got to get yourself back with toddlers.
Yeah, they're just, it's like, okay, let's do that. All right, let's think about that. Okay, there's something amazing. Right. So that's me.
A lot of your work revolves around observing children, like you said, people watching, child watching, toddler watching. And then there's that next step of documenting and communicating what you see. How do you find that supports your practice? How do you find that makes you a better early educator?
Well, to me, I don't want to jump really fast to the making a product kind of thing, because I think there's too much to think about and consider before I decide what I want to make visible. So the first step is I talk to other people about it, like my coworkers or my friends, people whose eyes don't glaze over. Like, that's why I want to be best friends with you, because you and I could like really have cool conversations, because I think, yeah, we could. There are so many possible meanings to make of what children are doing, and they just fill my heart and it's my intellectual practice, it's my emotional practice, it's my spiritual practice, all of that. So I spend a lot of time watching and thinking, and then I might write a story. I like writing learning stories to the children. So dear dear Reid, here's what I saw you do today. And here's why I loved it. And here's what I think it might mean. And so that's how I do it. I want to tell the children what I'm seeing and how I'm thinking about them. And I really realized sort of we all decide what story we're going to tell about children and their play. And I want to tell the best story. I want to tell the story where I connect most with them and try to really see who they are. Because the stories we tell ourselves and each other is what grows in our program, right? That's what we build. And if we're telling, these stories about what kids don't do and how they don't get along and
that's what becomes the narrative and the culture and the.
Exactly. So that's what I do. And then in the act of writing itself, that helps me articulate what I'm seeing, right? Like the act of writing. And I don't consider myself a writer, which is kind of funny now that I've written a lot of books. And I give Margie Carter credit for that, because in the beginning I would just talk and she would take dictation and I would read it back and go, oh, okay. I mean, that was our first book, but now I just write about my practice and my thinking. So that's part of my study. And then I really love to hear what other people in the profession, in other cultures are saying about what I'm seeing. So I do a lot of, I don't read like study volumes, but I go read some, a couple pages of something. Like I think you just had Peter Gray the other day. I love reading him because it so deepens my idea about things. Anyway, I read brain research. I read stuff about the universe. I just try to think of all these other perspectives that I might bring to bear on what I'm seeing. So it's
that lifelong learning piece. And I think that too is something we have in common, that we're so hungry to like know more, and we're curious and we have questions like, what does that mean? And so I always reading and thinking and fluid. It's interesting because I think in some ways, being a play person, I come off rigid and like, this is what I believe about children in play, which I really do have strong beliefs based on what I keep seeing over and over and over again. And then it lines up with what I'm reading about brain research and what I'm reading about development. But there's also that fluidity of saying, wait a minute, hold up. Let me watch that again, because that's different than what I had previously thought. Or, let me read that. That makes me wonder. And when I go back and observe again, I'm going back with that different bit of information to look at it a little differently and say, that's the fluidity in that little door open and the windows open to learning and thinking about yourself too. You said before we started recording about how much this is reflective practice for ourselves as people who work with young children. It's soul work. It's human work. I feel I don't know, much more connected with myself and the child when I'm going through this process of paying attention, deep attention to what they're doing and what I'm thinking about what they're doing, and like how those two things mingle together. It's just so fascinating to me.
Well, and that was something I was really interested in talking with you about, is this idea of what's the role of the adults? Because a lot of my work has been about, adult education and professional development, and they're adults, like children, need to discover their own way. So this thing you just described about thinking and revisiting and going back, that's what I promote with adults. It's like, you can't tell adults what to do or do a lecture or all this other stuff that we lay on top of them, assessments and curriculum guides, and have them really be present and thinking and offering responsiveness to children. So I it's not my favorite part of my work, working with adults, but I do have a really passion about sharing this with other people. So to me, that's part of the process, that really what we want as adults is to be what you just described. It's like curious thinking side by side. And I've learned a lot about how my brain is so different than a child's brain, that, and they have so much more going on there than I do in certain ways. Their whole incredible sensory abilities to take in information and to feel things more deeply, to see things. They see things we don't see. They hear things we don't hear. They experience things more deeply than we do, because our brains have, got more focused in terms of our prefrontal cortex. So we block out information all the time, and we have all these preconceived ideas from language. In fact, sometimes I worry about too much language with kids, because I think what I've seen with my toddlers is once they make a pizza out of the Play-Doh, they only make pizzas. They don't do the Play-Doh anymore like they used to. So I just think about that all the time. Like, what's my role and how do I see that? And one of my other really fun nerd facts is that there's been research that looks at when does an adult brain look like a child's brain? Like, they've done imaging. Have you read this? And
I've seen some memes about it.
Yeah, basically what the research shows is that our brains behave like children's brains when we're dreaming or when we're on psychedelic drugs.
Whoa.
Yes. So if you think about that, I always knew kids were high. I'm from the 60s, so I've always known they were high. Anyway, so I just think, like, what are they seeing? Like, what are they noticing? And then my adult rigidness gets in the way. Like, I was just rereading, I was looking for a article to send for some handouts of a workshop I'm doing. I was just rereading this observation it did of this, how old was that baby? Like maybe 10 months old, exploring a box with a lid that I had offered a whole pile of boxes. And she like moved all the boxes out of the way and just had this one. And I was like, okay, all right, I get it. You want to focus. And then she didn't have real competent motor skills yet to open the box. So she kept trying to open it. And I had to like put myself back, because I'm from an Italian family, and the grownups are always in your face, which is a good thing on one hand. Another thing, not so good. So I'm watching her, and I had to do everything I could to
not open the daggone box.
Here, let me open it for you. And, and then I got bored with her doing this box, right? It's like, what? So I tried to offer another one, and she went like, nah, she didn't want that one. So she kept doing it. And then, like you said online, you said something this morning online about getting on your belly to look at something. So I got down really low so I could see what I was looking at, the box and looking at her. And what I realized is that what she discovered is that when she opened the box and let it fall, a little breeze came off of it.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. I mean, who would have?
We would never think it. There's so many times in a day where I would never think what that toddler just thought.
Yeah, it's sometimes really baffling, but then it's like, whoa. So I just think it takes lots of practice looking for those little nerdy details. Like yesterday, I watched these kids bury some dinosaurs in the sand. And, this is just this random, most people wouldn't notice it. But I got really into it again down. I don't get on my belly much because I'm old and it's hard to get up, but I get down really low. And they were just spent a really long time, like covering the feet, lining them up like in a line, and then covering their feet, and then proceeded to, and basically I also look at what role am I playing, what have I did. So I just said something, like I thought was interesting to me. I said, oh, it was cold out. So I said, the dinosaurs probably feel warm when you're covering their feet. And then Reese, the little girl, she said, oh yeah, they're so cold. We're going to cover them up and give them a place to be. So they ended up covering the dinosaurs all the way up and then talking about how they were warm. That was just from one thing I said. So again, to me, it's such an interesting notion. What's my role? And when I do play a role, what's the outcome of it? And to me, I think we have to make decisions about what we value so that we play a role that we value, because there's so many possible things to do that that's why this reflective practice is so important. Like, what
Yes.
do I value here? And for me in the moment, I was cold and I was sharing my cold because I just got back from California and now I'm here in cold. And she picked right up on that.
Yep.
And I have to say, I've seen that so many times because I was a CDA advisor for a lot of years. And my job was to watch kids and teachers. And I saw so many times teachers do things that they had no clue that the child picked up on, right? So children are so gracious. They're like, oh, that's an interesting thing. I'll go for that.
Sometimes you can use that to your advantage to support some social support. And then other times it totally hijacks the play.
Yeah.
So it's such an intricate art, right? It's a science and an art. It's such an intricate thing. And I think part of too why it excites me is it's ever changing. It's organic. You're never going to get it perfect. So it's always something that you have to, keep challenging yourself with and keep working on. I don't know how many times that I've said something that just came out of my mouth. And then I was like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Or how many times maybe, it could be as simple as, depending on the child, where I stand, certain children will see an adult and it will immediately pop their bubble and stop their play and shift it towards the adult. And it comes with knowing the child. And you said earlier, observing them and paying attention to them really helps you deeply know the child. So it's so intricate because every single child, every situation, as fast as the wind blows, they change and we change and our interactions change. So I am always thinking about how I engage with children and what I'm saying, but I'm also human. So, and you also want to be authentic. So it's just this balance of, really what I think all genuine relationships have, that balance that you have to consider, who's this person? If you and I are going to be best friends, Deb, we're going to have to consider the ebbs and flows of our personalities, right? And I think that's the same. And that's part of the role of the teacher, is like really knowing the children and considering who they are as individuals and being present and offering what that individual needs. And having I have individual relationships with the children in my program. And then I have collaborative community, we are a community and we are together and depending on each other. It's interactive. It's interdependent. We co-regulate. We, all of that together. But then there's that individual knowing of each child that I think has to get woven into the whole culture of the place.
Well, that was what you piqued my interest, because do you have a go-to that if you weren't paying attention to I think we have to pay attention to ourselves, not just the kid, because that relationship, what happens is more about you than about them. No matter how much you try to put them first.
Yep.
It's like what you're noticing, the eyes you're seeing with, the ears you're hearing with, just come from your experience and your values and all of that. So do you have a go-to? Like, do you go to the child's point of view first? Do you try to figure out what their point of view is? Or are you, I'm just curious.
That's a great question. I have to think about that. I think in most cases, I don't know. I think it depends on the situations. What do I believe I should do every time? I think for me, intentionally, I want to go to the child's point of view, and I want to go. I would say my go-to is like the child, the relationship that I have with them, and what I know about them first. At least that's my goal. That's what I want my go-to to be every time, to go to that child. What do I know about them? As my first go-to. I would say, secondly, I think about myself and what interaction I need to have based on the first question, like what I know about them and what they need. So for example, if two children are in conflict, I may have one child who gets super frustrated, super upset, and cannot talk cannot resolve, cannot do those things until they are calm. I may have another child who wants to resolve it right now, who has all the words and is ready to, ready to deal with this. And the one child who's super upset may just need me to hug them and not ask them any questions, not try to solve anything, none of that. And the other child may need conversation and dialogue, and just observing them and knowing them and spending time with them helps me know what to give them in those moments versus coming in blind. And I think that before I worked in an environment where we were child-centered and play-based, it wasn't about that. I didn't know the children deeply. I knew the curriculum. I knew, that we had to have circle time at a certain time. I knew, who was boisterous and who wasn't, but I never had the time to really observe them doing things that they weren't given by me to do. I get to see what they will naturally do and how they naturally behave, which gives me so much more data, so much more human understanding of who they are. So I can give them back, humanness as well. It's just unscripted.
That's so fascinating. My thing I want to ask you is, how did you change? Because I grew up, it was the 60s. It's like all the time play, and there were Head Start was beginning, so there was starting to be some of that, but it was more about play and socialization when I first started in the profession. And I've never worked in a place that had rules like that. I was a Head Start ed coordinator for about 8 years, but I was always about let's play. So I never felt that pressure. So I always try to, how do you help people like you? How you started?
How do you get them from?
How did you get interested in kids and think it was important to know what their point of view is, that they had a point of view? Like, what helped you get there?
Well, if I can remember back, if I go all the way back, first of all, my own childhood, I was outside. I was playing. I was in the forest. I was in the creek. I was a risk taker. I loved speed. I loved height. I loved nature, all those things. So that was within me.
Lucky
within me. I know. Let me tell you, I was born in 79. So I was a child during the 80s, and when we were just outside playing. So I had that within me. I know that's what childhood is, but at the same time, I also wanted to be a teacher. And what I liked about being a teacher was the leadership part. I enjoyed leading and stuff, little worksheets and calling all the neighborhood kids and having them, do my teacher stuff. My gosh, I played teacher, and the poor neighborhood kids, they couldn't even sleep in. I knock on everyone's door and have them come to school. So when I went to actually work with young children, I'm working from the knowledge that I went to school. I know what teachers do. I'm working from that playing teacher role, not thinking, I'm going to a place for childhood where children are going to be children. I'm thinking I'm going to a place where I've got to teach them something. So, and then I entered a system where that's what we were doing. But when you enter that system and you're working with children and you already come from a place of play, and I'm a silly, playful person, my beginning years were a combination. I'm doing what they do in traditional programs where things are very scheduled, and you have lesson plans and you're telling the kids what to do, but I'm silly and I'm playful, so that we're singing and we're dancing and we're painting and we're doing all those things, but it still didn't feel authentic. But at that time, I didn't know why. I didn't feel like something was missing. I thought it was great, and then internet came along, and you could really attach with other people like yourself. I had read some of your books along the way, and I've heard of you, and I worked with
Debbie and Wendy.
Yes, I worked with Deb Lebo and Wendy. So that was my, I
heard about you way back then too. They told me stories about you.
I mean, I'm telling you, I just had these glimpses of what it should be, and it would always bring me back to my own childhood and the feelings that I had. And honestly, I would say it was the internet, Facebook, getting to know people mixed with the children themselves. Like along the way, there would be a child in every classroom, different situations that would test something that wasn't appropriate. It caused me to question it. and caused me to think about it and caused me to change my mindset on it. But the biggest thing that helped me change was seeing other programs that were doing it the way that felt right. So you
So
can
it sounds
see
to me like your childhood was really the source of you being able to recognize it in programs when you saw it.
Yes.
That's what it sounds like to me. Like here you had this fabulous childhood. You played school, and then you just started seeing glimpses of, oh yeah, we can do this here. So all right, well, how do we get grown-ups back to it? Because I worry now, there's so many kids now who are in these rigid places from childhood. They don't get these experiences. So that harms them in the early years, and then they don't have it as teachers to see how it could be different. It's really a dilemma. Yeah, a dilemma. Yeah, you and I could be best friends because I had similar notion. I love to play, and I played all the time, and I loose parts and finding treasures and putting, creating the play environment, which I think you and I share. Creating a place to play was my favorite thing as a child. I did that all the time, and I didn't never really get to the play part.
The play, yep. The play was the designing.
Yeah. So, and then I played teacher all the time too, and I wanted to be a teacher, and I was sure of it, like from the time I was little. And then I went to school, and I went to college, and I went into the teacher training program and wanted to be a teacher. And I went through it, and my first practicum, I went there and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I don't. Yep.
It was like all bells and lines. And I went to my advisor at the college, and I said, this isn't what I wanted. They just, I think I just like playing school. So she says to me, this was before early childhood professional development was a thing. It was, California had a children's center permit. It was like 1972 or something. There was hardly any, any training for childcare. So she goes, well, you might go to the home economics department and take, they have nursery school training there. That was a really hard one for me because I was a feminist and I burned my bra, and the idea that I should go to home economics
training. Yeah.
I would not be a home economics person. So, she said, they play in preschool. And I'm like, okay. So seriously, that's how I got into it, through that. And I never was a home economics major. I became a communication theory person, which has really served me well with all this perspective taking and that kind of thing. And I just took every early childhood course I could that they had at the time. And I did practicums in early childhood. I actually worked in a preschool that I went to preschool. When I was, yeah, I know, it was pretty cool. So you and I could be best friends, that we were the same path, and you saw yours, and there were basically the first person that I saw in the world that like looked at the world the way I did was Bev Boss. She was back then too, where it was this play based, and actually Margie and I used to have these really great conversations about because Margie was a kindergarten teacher, and she's always been a bit more, I don't want to say rigid because she's not rigid, but a bit more framed, a bit more structure for her thinking. So she and I have always had these great tensions and conversations. I think that's what's made our work so good together, because we fought a lot, and we never, either one of us never gave up our points of view. We just merged with new ones. And I think that's what I think about the work that I do. It's never me alone. It's always some new thing that comes from. And that's what you see with kids, right?
Yeah.
They're so much more interested in the relationship than they are the outcome of the play. I see that time after time after time. And I think we don't notice it enough. We think they need to be fixed and told what to do. And that's another thing I see in your work online. It's like you let things play out. You don't move in to solve every problem. And to me, I look for, how are they showing me they know how to get along, and what role can I play to help them see themselves getting along? Because I think that's really a powerful role to play. It's like, oh, look, you both like that same thing. And that works a lot.
I remember your presentation that you did for the pandemic conference that I had. And you talked a lot about helping the other child see the perspective of their peer. And that was interesting. That made me, like I said, I hear something and I say, that sparked something in me. Let me go back and let me take that back in the classroom and have my observation filter through that thought. And that's what I did. So that's something now that's like in my backpack that I'm thinking of as I'm working with young children. So
well, that to me is one of the roles I want to play. And Rukia has actually challenged all of us, me too, in thinking about this notion of child-centered practice. And sort of the idea that that's a real individual white dominant perspective, that this individual and their ideas should be at the center. So I've been onto it already in terms of this notion of how children see each other and how they're more interested in each other than their own ideas usually. And that's actually, that's the book she and I are writing right now, is like, how do we see children come into the world prepared to be in relationship? They already have all these amazing gifts getting along. They want to, they're eager for it. And then they're incredible communicators.
They're eager for that relationship.
And non-verbally, they're able to read people. And a lot of people call that manipulative. Like if a child knows what you're going to do before you do it, I think, wow, look how smart they must be. They read my every body language, my voice. They know how I'm going to react, and they do it to get a response. So I think about the role I like to play rather than the child being at the center, the relationship at the center. So my relationship with the child, because I can't be out of it if I'm in it, right? I got to know what is. And so I look for, what are they doing that I love, that I can hook up with? What are they doing that I'm really interested in and love? Rather than just try to center who they are, I try to center us, that we have a connection. And that's how I think about when they're with each other. How do I help them see each other when I see how much they share and they're not seeing it at the moment? That's how I do conflict. So I'll sometimes go, oh, you really like what he's doing.
Yep.
You'd probably like to try that. And I tell the other child, they really like what you're doing. And again, trying not to, tell them what to do, but just offer it. And more often than not, actually, by the time they're 4, we already trained it out of them. We've already told them, you got to share. It's not your turn. He was first. In fact, they start saying that.
That's why we don't do that stuff.
Yeah.
So what you just said reminds me of something that happened in my classroom this week. So I have a child who, we have these little, what do you call those? Cat's meow houses or buildings, and they're from our actual town. So one of the kids is really connected with these pieces. He takes them out almost every day and lines them up in different ways. It's interesting too, because it's getting more intricate and more storylines going with it. And along came another child with animals, and she wanted to put the animals in the little divots he was making with the houses. And he wanted nothing to do with the idea. And she was just watching him and trying to find her way in. And he said, she keeps following me. She, telling me, she keeps following me. I told her, I want her to stop. And I said, I wonder if she's interested in what you're doing. I wonder if she thinks what you're doing is interesting. And then I looked at her and I said, do you think what he's doing is interesting? And she said, yeah. And then his whole facial expression and body language turned to like, oh, you're interested in what I'm doing. Oh, well, by all means, bring your, it shifted something, because before he just saw it as a nuisance. Like, I'm doing something. I'm thinking something. This is important to me. But then when he realized that what was important to him was also interesting and important to her, it opened up a door. And it was just a simple observation that I had, that I shared with them, that totally made the difference into how he perceived her involvement. So again, that truly does shift something when you help them.
You are my best friend now, for sure. Because I just love that story. That's such a great story. And I think it works most of the time, right? because I really believe like innately children are more interested in relationship and connection than they are the stuff and their ideas. And that if we can notice it and see it, it will grow. But if we're constantly just, oh, you know, he had an idea, blah, 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 blah. They don't see that there's this interdependence. And I've started thinking about the idea of how do I offer the idea of fairness, because I've also seen that children really understand that. Like they use that a lot, what's fair and what's not fair. And I want to know more about what they understand. In fact, research shows all the way up into like 7 or 8-year-olds still will give up their thing most of the time if they think other people aren't going to have what they have. It's like, we got to help that grow. I mean, we need it so in the world. So like in a thing like that, I might say to the child who has everything. In fact, this just happened a couple weeks ago. This little girl, Laura, she was playing with Play-Doh with all the cups. She had all the cool little shiny cups and she was working with them, and other children wanted them and she didn't want to give them up. And I said, well, Laura, look, you have all the cups and nobody else has any. That doesn't seem fair. And she was like, but I need them all. So I really the idea of equity isn't about equal. It's about, are you getting what you need? So to me, it's sort of like, how do I protect this child's idea, but also help them live into this idea of interdependence? So I said to her, well, they don't have any and they would like some. Can you think of, and she's an older child, so she could take this on. I said, can you think of something you might do to help it be more fair? So she's thought for not very long, because she's smart as a whip. She went and found some other cups to give to the other children. And it was like, here. And that was, I mean, to me, that was like so cool. And to have those little moments like you described and like this description. I did it again with a little younger group after that, where it was Virginia, who had all these boxes. And, I didn't want to tell them what to do. So, but they were wanting some. And so I just said, Virginia, you have all the boxes and nobody else has any. It doesn't seem fair to me that you get them all and nobody gets any. And she was like, sure, she did not want to offer any, but they kept going, that's not fair. We need some. So her way of doing it, she didn't get mad or anything. She just left and went and found something else to do. So I thought that was fine, that she just took it upon herself to make herself comfortable, but then left it to other kids. So for me, the role I played was helping them see each other, helping them see this idea of interdependence and fairness. And, we have lots of opportunities, lots of stepping stones. So you don't have to fix it every time.
Exactly. That's why I said it's a process, like everything else in development. It's a process. It's an unfolding. So, and even when you mess up, even when you do something that you thought would be a good thing, or maybe you were in a rush and, you said the wrong thing, it's a process. There's always the next time. I think it's important that we're reflective and that we're honest about ourselves and our role and our part in what's happening in our environment. And then we take that back. So not just observing the children, but like being cognizant of ourselves in the atmosphere. That's the biggest thing for me, to continue to like be a better caretaker of them. But the act of observing and documenting and watching back videos and looking at photos closely, it really teaches me so much. Just like the biggest teacher, we do documentation nightly for our parents, where we upload photos and literally tell the stories of what the children are doing. And there are some nights I go back and I look at the pictures and I look at the videos and I look and I'm writing about it. And I'm, like you said, I'm just like, wow. There's one child in our program she's super active and she's really good at like communicating through other children, but she is quieter. And I was observing the photos of them working with clay, because we were doing a piece for a project that we were doing. And looking at the pictures and looking at the video and not looking at the child that's like the sage on the stage in front who has lots to say and so interesting, and looking back beyond that in the video and looking beyond that in the photos, I'm like, oh my goodness, she was a sleeper. I thought she was back there just not doing much, but I'm looking at these photos and these videos and there became this whole story of her engagement and actions and thinking around this clay. That really taught me something. Now I'm like, I have to look past the obvious more often. So again, that project was meant to it was meant to do what it did. And it taught me so much about myself and what I'm looking at.
Yeah. And what I hear you saying, I think that's why it's really useful to this side-by-side notion that you are looking at the child and yourself. Like you're looking at, what are you looking at? That's what you do. In fact, I do this side-by-side work in communities where I go in for a week and I go into classrooms with teachers and they don't have a role. The group I'm working with, we're watching kids with other adults. And the first thing I always suggest to them is don't notice the kids first. Notice yourself. What are you noticing? What are you seeing? What are you drawn to? And then now look at what's happening that you weren't looking at, that you, now that you have time, because I don't know that people can do that without practice. What you said, like look beyond or look behind. Because then you understand there's so many things unfolding and you're deciding what to pay attention to, whether it's conscious or not, right? So you have to look to yourself first. What am I noticing and why? Like, why am I drawn to this? And then I say, now look at what's happening and what would you do if you were the teacher and why? And now that you can't do it, what happened? Like, did something happen different than you thought would if an adult wasn't in it? So I just really think that's a powerful tool. I do that a lot. I mean, in fact, that's what I said when I was a CDA advisor. I couldn't do anything. I just had to watch. So I got to see what I was noticing and see what I might do and see what teachers did and what kids did in response and what kids did when teachers weren't around. And that's where I think I gained my deep respect for children, is that and then this notion that you really need to pause and notice yourself first. That's really what I think we need to do. The kids, because what we're noticing with the kids is what we're noticing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you're going to decide, you're going to hone in on this kid. Why did you decide that? Like, what is it that you're seeing that you're drawn to? So that's why I think we also need to look for what we love. Because 10,000 things are happening. You can't see everything. And if you look for what you love and you look for children's competence, like where are children showing you, they already know what to do in the world. You're going to grow something where everyone's going to be doing what you hope they do because paying attention to. Anyway, and again, it sounds simple, but it's really not.
It's not.
Especially today with, you got a zillion kids, you got to get through a schedule, you got parents, you got licensing, you got everything, right? You got everything you got to pay attention to. And if you haven't had the practice of seeing how fun it could be to just watch, I tell people, even for 30 seconds, just try to step back and grow that idea that this is really amazing what's happening here. And yeah, I just think it takes a lot of practice and I kind of lose patience for grownups.
I know, I need to work on that too.
I feel sorry for them because they can't see the power of it, but I also get really impatient. It's like, seriously, like, what is this about? Like, why can't you just stop? And I think because people have an idea about what your role as a grown-up is and what your role as an educator is. And if we don't help them see these different roles, that's what I always look for that's why I hopped on that thing you did this week where you said you brought the record player, because I've never seen you, besides sort of all your amazing way you set up your environment, I've never hear you talk about the role you play when you watch children do something. And that was like I don't know if that's true, if you've done others, but that's where I hopped on that. And I said, well, what were you thinking? Like, why did you do that? Because I really think we need to help people see that you're choosing a role. And if you're choosing not to be in it, that's something a role that's having an impact.
I agree with you. I think that that's something that because I try to put my finger on what is it that we're not saying that is what's missing. Why aren't people understanding the value of allowing children to play? What are we not communicating? And I think one of the huge things that I need to do better with, and that I think as a whole, the community of people who are trying to get this message across need to do better at, is explaining the role of the teacher, explaining what it is that we're doing, and what that means and how it supports, because it's not out there enough. So I guess you got to write a book about it.
Well, that's what all my books are about.
Okay, let me phrase it. I guess people need to read your book.
Yeah, there you go. The books are about noticing children and noticing yourself and making meaning. I mean, to me, that's simple, right? Oh, look what a child's doing that I'm paying attention to. Oh, look, how do I think about it? How do other people think about it? Oh, what does it mean? And what might we do? Every one of our books has that whole reflective process in it.
I know. I have your books.
Yeah.
And I don't have all of them, but I was looking at, when I was going to interview you, I was like, let me look and see how many books that she has written, so I can, if I need to say it in the introduction. And I'm like, oh, I have that book. I have that book. I have that book. Oh, I need to get this one. I have that book. So I have your books, and I've had some of them for a really long time before I met you. So, it's quite surreal to be best friends now.
All right. Don't go there, because you can't be my best friend if you do that to me. People will tell you I do not like that. Well, if you want to know my favorite book, it's The Art of Awareness. That's my favorite of all. And we've just got a new edition coming out, like probably in the summer sometime. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I love that book, because that's what your question about what would help people know why play and to do play. That book has all the answers.
That's the book.
From my point of view. Because I think if people could just pause and marvel, and that's what that book's about. It's about being, and Art of Awareness actually was the name of one of my communication theory textbooks. And you're allowed to use titles without copyright. So I use that book. But I was teaching an observation class a zillion years ago when that book, and it was a lot of stuff from that class about trying to help people just to stop and see. Like I did all these fun things with them to like spot the difference things, and mindfulness things, and artist things, just so people could slow down and see details even before they started watching kids, right? Just, you gotta develop that.
All right. Okay. I have that book. I was sitting here thinking, when you said the details about looking at paintings or artist things, and I was like, wait a minute, I've read that. So I looked it up, and yes, it's the one with the sand on the cover.
Right. That's actually the second edition. No, wait, you might have the first edition. What color is it?
It is
hold it up, let me see it.
Let me see, can you see that? Tan with sand and a rock in it.
Actually, that's the first edition, I think.
Okay, that's the one that I have in my house. So
no, that's the second edition. The third edition is coming out, and the cool thing about it, because that's another thing about the role of the teacher, anti-bias equity stuff doesn't come up unless grown-ups notice and bring it up. That's another whole conversation we could have. So that's in the new edition. It's like got these moments where their children are showing you their point of view about equity and fairness and differences and similarities, and there's little stories in each chapter that are about that. So Margie and I've been trying to do a broader idea about including some of these equity and issues in them. So that's my favorite book. My second favorite, you said you were using with your staff, Really Seeing Children. I love that, because those are just these little articles that I wrote, and then they turned them into a book. So I love those. They're to me, that is the answer. That's the process. Those articles show, here's this thing I saw. Here's how I'm thinking about it. Here's other things I've seen that made me think about it. And to me,
can you tell our listeners how to get in contact with you, how to find your books? I guess your contact. Give us your information so that people can find you and learn more from your work.
So my email is Deb, DEB, ECE, like early childhood education, trainers.com. Deb, gmail.com.
Okay.
Deb,
Awesome.
ECEtrainers@gmail.com. And then Nadia and I have a Facebook group called Children's Lively Minds. So you can often see interesting things there. Yeah, so that's another place to contact me.
And where's the best place to get your books? Is there a place where you can get all of them? Is it through the publisher, or where should people go for that?
Well, they're everywhere. If you want to discount,
just Google Deb Curtis.
If you want to discount, you can contact me directly and I'll sell them to you at my price. Well, not really. That's a lot of work. But I'd say go to the press. I mean, if you know about how royalties work, you don't make very much in royalties. That's not why you write books. Even when you have a lot of them, it's a good chunk, but not a lot. If you go right to the press, you get more royalties as an author. If you go to Amazon, it's like several percentages left. So it's up to you if you want to do Amazon. Amazon has them. Red Leaf Press, and then Exchange Press has my Really Seen Children book, and also other really good books that aren't me.
And that was another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. Defending the Early Years works to support the rights and needs of young children nationally. Learn more at DEY.org. Pay us a visit, sign up for our newsletter, or connect with us on social media. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.